That brings us just a few minutes early to the annual beach condition survey. David, are you going to introduce this?
Yes, I will go ahead and introduce this. So, got this up on the screen. So annually, the town of Nags Head conducts an annual beach condition survey, and this follows our beach maintenance and monitoring plan that we have approved from FEMA. And so this area encompasses not only the 10-mile nourishment project length, but also includes the northernmost mile, as well as south of the project area in the National Park Service property. And so the reason why we do this is that we want to see as frequently as possible the condition of our beach and how it responds to the ever-changing environmental conditions. By going ahead and acquiring this data, it can tell us where we are and how well the beach is performing. And so we work with our consultants, Moffitt and Nickel. Today we have Beth Shadone and Aisha Karanche to help us. Well, they'll go ahead and they'll present the findings from the most recent survey that was done here this past June and finished in July. And then after their presentation, there were several other things I wanted to follow up with the board on as far as some of the findings in the report and other actions that the board could go ahead and consider in moving forward.
Okay. Very good, thank you.
All right. I also wanted to mention that included in your packet was a preliminary draft of the beach condition survey, and we have gone ahead and passed out hard copies to the board at this time. And so each board member has a copy of that in front of them. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Beth.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. It's a privilege to be here today presenting to you all. And as David said, we're going to be reviewing the results of this summer's monitoring surveys. This is a brief outline of the presentation. I'm just going to review for everyone the survey transects, as David said, all the way from the north end of town south to Oregon Inlet, the dates of the survey, how we compute the shoreline change and the volume change. Briefly review what the weather's been like over this past year in terms of storms and wave conditions. And then finally conclude with the findings. What are the shoreline and volume changes that were observed this year? And also, since we have the new recently adopted Beach Nourishment Master Plan, I'm going to review for the first time the status of the beach in terms of those volumetric triggers that were established as part of the master plan, and then have some time for questions. Once again, these are the survey transects. This just shows a map where the north is to your right. You can all see, obviously, the inlet to your left. And then the nourished ocean front is indicated, and the total monitored ocean front as well. As David mentioned, most of the survey was conducted in June, between June 18th and June 26th. There was a slight delay when McKibbin Creek had to obtain permits to do the survey in the National Seashore, and that was concluded at the end of July. During that time, there was some significant scarping observed in Reach 4, and due to that, then the additional transects in Reach 4 were resurveyed there at the end of July, just to get an understanding of what was going on there, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. As a reminder, when we compute the shoreline change, we are looking at how the elevation 1.18 feet NAVD 88 changes. That's approximately your mean high water elevation. So like in this case, you see an earlier survey that's in blue, later survey that's in red, and the difference between those is about 80 feet at that 1.18 elevation where you see those arrows. So that would be the shoreline change, how we're computing that. For volumes, we are calculating volumes above a bunch of different elevations, and you can kind of see those here. Above the +6 elevation is kind of giving us an idea of what is happening in the dune. Then anything above that mean high water elevation is going to tell us what's happening in the dry beach area. Then we have sort of a recreational beach, like an intertidal where people are swimming above the -6, then out to the outer bar about -14, and then to depth of closure approximately -19, and then all the way offshore. These surveys extend out to the -30 contour elevation. And we're using all of these different volumes to compute the changes from year to year, as well as to update kind of what's going on in terms of the background erosion weights. And as I mentioned, we're now also assessing the current beach profile status in comparison with those triggers that were developed as part of the master plan. So this plot shows the wave conditions just offshore Duck at the Army Corps Pier. This was a season, which I'm sure, since you all live here, you know, where you had numerous high wave events and high water level events. During one of those really severe events, you can kind of see in a box, the buoy actually went out, and so we're actually gathering data at a buoy that was just a little bit further offshore. That's this box here in the middle. There was wave heights recorded during this nor'easter in December last year, with wave heights of over 20 feet. So pretty significant. And in addition, there's another event that I really wanted to call your attention to, was this multiple winter storms event. And during that time period in March, we had 72 hours where the wave heights were above 10 feet. So that was kind of a constant, you know, just hammering that what the beach underwent this year. Up at the top, you see kind of our survey status. So we started with the annual conditions survey last June. Because of those events which you see there, Idalia, Ophelia, Hurricane Lee, we actually, the town conducted an additional survey in October of last year. And you'll remember what we observed at that time was that a lot of that material was in the offshore bar area, kind of out there. But what happened this year with all of these events is that the beach profile didn't really have the opportunity to recover like it normally does in the summertime. So, and also just for comparison purposes, there were 16 of these wave events where the wave heights were over 8 feet, and kind of on a regular basis, it's more like 8 to 10. So this was a pretty significant year in terms of wave heights and storms. This plot shows the volume changes by reach. We actually kind of flip-flopped here now. Nags Head North is on the left and the National Seashore is on the right. So north is on the left of this plot and the south is on the right. The orange-ish bars, if you can see them, on the left are the +6, so kind of giving you an idea of what's happening with the dune. And then this sort of teal color is all the way out to the deepest offshore elevation, -30. So the depths of the elevations go from left to right as well. The take home here is that, you know, in the northern areas, in the Nags Head North, and in Reach 1, there were those reaches are looking pretty good. There were some accumulations where there were losses. They weren't significant. In Reach 2, there were gains in the dry beach and dune, but there were some losses in the intertidal range and out to the 19, but then there were gains out to the 30, which means basically that a lot of that material has moved into that offshore area in Reach 2. When you start looking at the ones further south, Reach 3 north, Reach 3 south, and Reach 4, there were some pretty substantial losses across the underwater portions of the profile, and in 3 south and Reach 4, there were losses across all the elevations. Just wanted to call your attention to some of these specific numbers in the table, which is in your report. Basically, we're seeing significantly higher than historical losses across the southern reaches. In reaches 3 north and 3 south, usually they're between 15, 20, up to 23 cubic yards per foot that we're seeing lost annually. This year it was more like 38. Across the entire, if we average across the entire nourished ocean front, we've lost about 500,000 cubic yards, and it kind of averages out to about 9.5 cubic yards per foot. If we look at the whole, everywhere that was monitored, it was about 10 cubic yards per foot, so very similar volumetric losses on average. So again, we're seeing a lot of these losses localized in reaches 3 and 4. This plot specifically looks at sort of the results in the dune, the volume changes above the +6. Again, with the reach 1 on the left and reach 4 over here. And then we have sort of the comparison with pre-nourishment conditions prior to, which were, this pre-nourishment condition corresponds to April 2019. The takeaway from this slide is that in reach 4, there's been about 38% of the place material lost from above that +6 elevation, which indicates significant degradation of the dunes in that reach. Further illustrate this, some of you may have been out there and seen this. This slide shows the situation at McCall Court in South Nags Head as of July 27th. David Ryan took this photo, and this was when the call was made to ask McKibben Creek to go back out and survey as well. And the plot on the right shows the material loss just between June and July of this year. So that's a pretty significant loss. There was about 30 feet of shoreline recession and about 15 cubic yards per foot of sand lost across the profile just during that time period. And as you can see in this photo, this area, reach 4 and reach 3 as well, is just getting such a narrow beach that it doesn't take a whole lot for the waves to reach the dune and cause us scarping impacts. Here's a few more pictures. Since that second survey, these are photos from mid-September. There's been continued dune erosion and scarping that you can see. East Pelican on the left and McCall Court on the right. And these impacts have not yet really been quantified by a survey. These are just photos that David Ryan was able to take and communicate to us. And again, I just want to point out the beach, as you can see, is relatively narrow there, and it just isn't taking a whole lot for the waves to reach the dune in these areas. This is a graph that shows the shoreline change in each reach relative to that pre-nourishment condition in 2019. We really especially wanted to highlight this bar graph that goes negative in reach 4. So essentially the shoreline position in reach 4 is landward of where it was prior to the nourishment in 2019. So this is a summary by reach of all the volume changes above the -19. The -19 is important to us because that's the volume that we're using when we're saying what sand is there that will be able to protect you from a storm event. And so that comparison is being done as well versus the conditions after the nourishment. And so these are placement losses that were computed. So you can see there's gain in the reach 1 and reach 2 above the -19, but in reach 3 north, 3 south, and reach 4, there's losses, and in reach 4, it's over 50% of that original volume. Now this plot combines every reach. I know we've been looking at plots where it was kind of north to south, but this is every single reach all combined together versus different elevations. And so when this is compared, here the take home is that, you know, there was some loss of material from last year to this year. Those are the right 2 bars, and you can see, You know, last year we were telling you we gained material, so you kind of never know what's going to happen. But this year we lost a bunch. This has kind of happened before from 21 to 22. You can see kind of some big drops here. But then in 2022, there was a post-Dorian project, and so that sort of mitigated some of that. So you can see that the volume gets back up here. But then this year, we're coming back down again. So just to make another point, that a lot of these volumes are within the lower elevations, and again, that just makes that material more vulnerable to being continually moved either alongshore or offshore. So now I want to talk about the comparison with the nourishment triggers. Essentially what the nourishment triggers do is that is a volume above the -19 that has been determined that it would protect, given the dune configuration and everything, but would protect against a 25-year return period storm. And so we're doing the comparison now because this is new. We've gone back and recomputed those profile volumes by reach all the way back to 2011, so you kind of get a perspective on how this has changed historically. So again, the time goes from left to right in each reach. And there's sort of one average for the entire beach, which is approximately 464 cubic yards per foot, and then there's additional separate triggers for each reach depending on the geometry there. So essentially, you know, you are still protected, volumetrically protected. However, we are seeing so many losses that we're a little bit concerned based on if this trend were to continue. So I wanted to show a little bit more detailed look on the volumetric trigger instead of grouping them all into reaches. This shows every single transect that's all surveyed across the beach. And you'll notice that there's a few red arrows that are showing places where those profiles are below the triggers already in reaches 3 and 4. And then we have some even in reach 2 that are getting somewhat close that are shown there in yellow. So the key takeaways here is that we have seen quite a few losses this year. There's basically an average of about 10 cubic yards per foot, or 500,000 cubic yards that were lost between June 2023 to June 2024. There's been substantial erosion and dune scarping in Reach 3 South and Reach 4 since the June and July survey. We've also talked with you all about the first nourishment event of the master plan being tentatively planned for summer 2027. However, if these trends, which are relatively, you know, maybe we'll be lucky and they won't continue, but if these losses do continue, this project may need to be conducted sooner if possible. We are also currently working on updating that FEMA beach maintenance and monitoring plan to incorporate these nourishment triggers, and we're planning to be back with you in November to present that as well at the November board meeting. Thanks. So I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, I'm really not surprised given the amount of northeast fetch we've had with these strange weather patterns this year, and there's really been no time for the beach to rebuild itself. But in Reach 3 and 4, is there sand still in the sandbars, or is it all moved offshore?
I mean, it had, when we looked at the ones just from the June to July comparison, there was a little bit of sand out in that offshore, but it wasn't accounting for all the sand that was lost from kind of that dry beach and dune. So, you know, we haven't done like a full model study. Based on some of the other wave direction analysis that we looked at, it, you know, suggests that it's possibly being transported either north or south, but possibly even transported toward the north, because when there weren't those nor'easters, there were significant east-southeast winds coming, and waves coming during the year, so it may have actually been transported north this year. Again, we haven't done like a full model study or something, but just kind of looking at it qualitatively. Looking at that particular survey, that material wasn't still right there in McCall, in the Reach 4 area. Some of the other areas further north did have accumulation of material in that more offshore area.
Yeah, thank you, that's unfortunate.
Is there any evidence, or is this part of your investigation, is there any evidence to indicate that the southernmost outfall is having any impact on erosion rates at the extreme south end?
I mean, I haven't particularly looked at that. I mean, it could be, it seems like sand is bypassing it because I don't see a lot of accumulation on either side when I've been out there.
Looking at the transformation of like, all the south is eroding, so I don't think.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it could, if it was totally blocking transport, it could be causing something, but it seems like it's not like you're seeing accumulation on one side or the other of the outfall, so I
Okay.
would say, yeah,
All right.
thanks, Aisha.
Thank you. Anybody else? We have a lot to study here. That was a really quick overview. It's a tremendous amount of information. I do think, and perhaps, I know David wanted to come back up and speak to some other things, but, how do we accelerate this if we made a determination that, is that even a reasonable discussion to think about whether a project could be accelerated?
Yes, and that was one of the things that we wanted to go ahead and discuss. Right now, if we wanted to go ahead and accelerate the planning process, now the planning process typically takes 18 to 24 months in advance of a nourishment project. So what we were hoping that the board would consider is if we came back in November, we could have a scope of work that defines that planning process, and we could go ahead and get that initiated sooner rather than later. Now, it doesn't commit us to having to do it earlier, but it puts us in a position that we can adapt as needed. And we can take a similar approach that we took in 2018, where we bid the project out over multiple years. And that way, it gives us, if we need to conduct it sooner, we have that ability. If the condition holds up, then we can go ahead and conduct it the following year.
Okay. All right. Thank you. What are your thoughts, board, given where we are?
For planning for preventive or being ready to move into action.
Yeah, I see you nodding as well,
I like the
Commissioner.
idea.
Agree. All right. Well, let's do what we can, David.
Okay. The other item I wanted to go ahead and speak about is last year we had done a fall survey. And as Beth had noted, the survey this year only captured a small portion of the erosion that we had seen during that July timeframe, but we weren't able to go ahead and capture some of the subsequent erosion. And the area that I think is most concerning is from Pelican Street all the way down to the southern corporate limits. And so we were asking if the board would consider conducting an additional fall survey this year. Included in your board packet is proposals from both McKim & Creed and Moffitt & Nichol to go ahead and move forward with that work. And so it would be to authorize the town manager to move forward with change orders for that scope of work, and also an amendment to the beach maintenance capital project ordinance.
Board, are you likewise of a mind to proceed with a fall survey?
I think I'd have a question for Amy is, do we have it in the budget?
Hi, so there's a capital project ordinance change with this agenda item, and we do have, it's part of the beach nourishment capital project ordinance. It's not in the general fund, so it's within that capital project ordinance, and it's just shifting money around that we didn't use previously for turtle monitoring. And so, yes, if you approve the capital project ordinance amendment.
And yeah, if we don't have to find money for it.
Right.
I think the more data, the better.
Yeah. Okay. I think, So that's something we need to put to a vote, so, I think and is that one item? Did I hear one item?
You could approve the scope and the proposal, and then separately approve the project ordinance.
Okay, all right, then let's have two motions to that effect.
Make a motion to approve the fall survey proposal.
Okay, all right, is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. And then,
I'll make a motion to,
sorry,
that's all right, fall survey project.
oh,
This one?
yes,
Capital project.
capital project,
Capital project, yeah.
yes. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you.
Mayor, I'll just say one last thing here. The beach, we rode the beach just a couple of days ago, myself and Chief Hale and Jimmy Pierce, and David wasn't with us, and so we were just looking at this observationally, and Pelican Street really was the break point for where the conditions got worse, and now that is what is showing on our beach driving map as being the area that we're going to close to beach driving this winter. And it's unlikely that we'll open that area to beach driving just based on the width of the beach in some areas where it's impassable, sometimes at all tides, but definitely at high tide. But then north of there, the beach gets really wide. And in some cases, it's the widest beach in the town, from Pelican Street almost all the way up to Jeanette's Pier. So, you know, just anecdotally, that kind of corresponds with some of the comments from Beth that some of the sand may be getting transported to the north. And we certainly saw a lot of these southeast swells this summer. And so you sort of think that it is moving sand to the north longshore.
Very good.